Hello and welcome to Super OK, where we try to do a decent enough job to entertain people with our opinions on video games. My name is Dale, and as always, I am joined here by two absolutely amazing human beings. Human being number one, Zando, how are you?
I'm well. How about yourself?
I am great. I'm legitimately great. I just came from the beach. I'm feeling real beach vibey today.
Nice.
Good vibes all around.
Feeling like a real beach?
Yeah, real son of a beach over here.
Sorry, I couldn't help myself.
We're gonna have a beach off. That's a quote from the Barbie movie. It's not out yet, but I've watched the trailer a lot. I don't know why. Anyway, speaking of good vibes, we got Mel here. Mel,
Hi,
how are you?
I'm doing really well. Thanks for having me today. I'm glad to be here.
What?
I mean, like, you got beach brain. I got boop brain. Yeah, you know how like sometimes like your thoughts just go and like disappear. I call it the boop.
Okay.
Everything just
it's just gone.
Oh, it's like it's
exactly.
like the blip in the MCU.
I call it the boop.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
5 years from now, it'll all come back to it. It's going to be awesome.
All right.
Remember that one time I was talking and I forgot what I was about to say? I remember what I was going to say now.
All right. Mel, you've been on like, I don't know, 50 of these episodes, maybe more. So like, I don't know. You saying thanks for having me seems pretty weird.
I mean, you know, you could have kicked me out a long time ago. I'm grateful for every day with you guys.
Aw, that's so sweet. Speaking of sweet, let's talk about things that made our week a little bit sweeter. We start every episode with a highlight of the week, thing that made our week a little bit better, a little bit brighter, a little bit nicer. Who wants to go first?
I mean, maybe our guest should go first since she's so happy to be here.
I'll go first. This past weekend, I was up north. I got to go to a place called Gaylord, and we ended up having some really amazing food when we were there. We got to eat like smoked whitefish, which was super delicious, and we went fishing on the lake. We actually drove to Mullet Lake, which is about like 40 minutes north of the city, and man, it was cool. It was a beautiful weekend to just like hang out and be on a boat. Oh, and fishing was so cool. I didn't catch a single fucking fish, but being on a boat was very cool.
Being on a boat rules.
It does. And I got a nice suntan. So yeah, I'll take it.
Last time I was up in Gaylord was last August, and they were still recovering from the tornado. Is it still? They kind of like rebuilt some stuff? Is there
there's
a lot of
places
shut
that
down?
are still shut down. But most of the places like the Walmart, I feel like is better now. I know like Jay's Sporting Good up there had like its roof caved in, and they definitely built that back now. So that's all taken care of.
Oh, that's
yeah,
good.
and it was just.
Yeah, I totally forgot that was a thing, and I drove into town. We go up every year for a family camp thing, and I went into town to get just to take a break and like have cell phone reception again. I was like, what the hell happened here? I completely forgot about that news story of this gigantic tornado that went through.
Yeah. For those of you listeners who are unaware of where Gaylord is, if you take your hand as though it were a map of Michigan and point to like your knuckle closest to the top of your middle finger, that's about where Gaylord is. So it's pretty far up there. It's a several hour drive. It's pretty far out from civilization. Yeah. I'm glad you had a great time.
It was really nice.
Speaking of great times, I celebrated my birthday. Not this last week, but the week before. And when that happened, Andrew's like, what do you want to do today? And I was like, I don't really have any designs. What do you want to do? And she's like, why don't we go to Detroit Shipping Co.? We'll play a board game. We love the food there. It'll just be like a good day. We couldn't really do anything outside because there was the air quality thing because Canada's on fire. And so we like sat down and we started playing a board game. And then all of a sudden, all my nibblings roll up and my sister's with them. And then my mom's there, and then my brother's there. And it was really cool because I rarely get to see all of my family in the same place. It's usually just like a Christmas thing. And so being able to spend my birthday with my family was really awesome.
Was it a surprise?
And then
that's
it
nice.
was. I was totally surprised. Yeah, it was great. I knew my sister was in town because she was staying with us, but I didn't I thought she had other plans that evening. So it was great. And then my birthday present from Ange was tickets to a string quartet playing a bunch of video game music, which was totally awesome. And my brother-in-law, Dan, who is in the Discord, not the Dan that we're always telling to fuck off, but a different Dan, also got tickets to this. And so we were like, let's go out to eat beforehand. What do you want to do? And he's like, well, both our wives are vegetarians, so why don't we go to Texas de Brazil? And we like gorged ourselves on just filet mignon wrapped in bacon, and then went and watched the string quartet actually absolutely tear up some video game music. It was awesome. So the combined birthday celebrations of all of that is my highlight.
When you went to Texas de Brazil, did you get the meat sweats?
We got the meat sweats so bad
while sitting watching a concert.
Yes, in like collared shirts in the Masonic Temple. Because if you've ever gone in the Masonic Temple, it's like a really, really old building, and so it has air conditioning the way that LaCroix has flavor.
Nice.
Like there's a hint of AC, but it's not like. It's not there. And so, yeah, we were just both sitting there like, oh, man, Nobu Ohatsu's amazing. I'm sweating. I can't stop sweating. And the concerts are all like candlelit. And so I'm not going to lie. It was a Herculean effort to stay awake because I'm just like full of meat. This beautiful music is playing. It's candlelit and dim. It's like a little too warm. I'm like, oh, but it was amazing. It was such a great experience.
Nice. Very nice. Well, since I last recorded, my highlight has been going to a concert for the band Thank You Scientist. They were opening for Between the Buried and Me, who played their Parallax 2 album in its entirety, which was something to see for sure. But Thank You Scientist is the main reason I went there. I've talked about these guys in the Discord. I've been obsessed with them since I accidentally stumbled across them at another live show back in 2021. They're kind of like jazz mixed with progressive metal and Coheed and Cambria, and it's amazing. So it was cool to finally see them in concert when I knew who they were and be able to like jam along with the music. They played a new song that I got a video of, and that sounds amazing. I got to meet the guitarist, the saxophonist, the trumpeter, and the drummer, and got to hang out with them for a little bit.
They had a trumpeter.
Found out they've got a new album coming out supposedly next year, so that was real exciting for me. So that's my highlight for sure.
So cool.
Yeah, they have a full horn section, right, Zando?
Just trumpet and saxophone.
Solid.
Yep. Trumpet, saxophone, violin, guitar, bass, drums, vocals. And the bassist also plays theremin every once in a while.
You gotta love it. Have I ever told you about the Rick Johnson rock and roll machine?
Hey, what?
The Rick Johnson rock and roll machine was this dude that I saw. His name's Rick Johnson. He's also the bass player, or was the bass player. He might still be. I don't know, for Mustard Plug. But his solo thing was him playing all of the other instruments on like a MacBook. So he would like hit the play button on a MacBook and then play bass along to it. And he had a theremin set up, and he would use the hand on the fretboard of the bass to play the theremin while he was playing the bass. It was absolute insanity.
Crazy.
That sounds like a rock and roll machine.
Yeah. He fucking rules. The music is ridiculous. Look it up. It's great. Did they play all of your favorite songs?
Not all of them. I've been so obsessed with like every single one of their albums that there are so many of my favorite songs. But they played probably my favorite song, which is called Mr. Invisible. If you're trying to gauge like, is this band going to be for me? Listen to that song, and if that doesn't like get you into them at all, then you're probably not going to like the rest. But all their songs are like 5 to 7 minutes long, so it's also kind of a an engagement to do.
Yeah.
So they played about 7 songs that night. So it was good. It was a good time.
Cool.
Yeah, when you said that you went and saw them, my one worry was they sound like they could be a jam bandy kind of thing where it's like, oh, it's 7 minutes on the album. It's 35 minutes in person.
No, they stick pretty strictly to what, because everything they do, especially the guitarist is nuts, man. Probably one of the most talented guitarists I've ever seen perform live, and he sticks to what he does on the album. So like everything is so methodical that there's very little like improvising at shows, and it was all pretty much just like what you would hear on the album. So I love that.
That's awesome. I love
That
when
is very
people
cool.
can play the album live and it sounds like the album, because then like that's studio quality work.
Mm-hmm. If I could post a video in the Discord, I absolutely would. But I did post something online, so maybe I'll try to link it in the Discord when the episode drops. You guys can check out the first song and their new song. So
nice.
Yeah. Anytime a band can do like studio quality work, it's like they have a cheat code for musicianship.
Seriously.
You know? Yeah. Speaking of cheat codes, y'all remember the Game Genie?
No. What's the Game Genie?
Game Genie was sweet. You would slot a NES game into it and then put that whole thing into the NES. And so the game would like kind of hang out. But then before the game started, you could put in these little codes and it would let you do basically anything in the game, right? So it's like if you're playing with Super Mario, it's like, oh, now your jump is 3 times as high, or there's low gravity, or you always have fire flower, or the clock runs backwards, or you can jump over the flagpole and get to level -1, or the sky's green for no reason. Like there were all sorts of different cheat codes that you could do. It was pretty cool. But in 1980, game developers discovered their version of the Game Genie, a mystical cheat code called Procedural Generation. It's like having a magical genie that can conjure up levels, quests, characters in the blink of an eye. Forget about painstakingly designing every nook and cranny. Now it's all about letting algorithms do the heavy lifting. They used this new technology in 1980 to create a game called Rogue. And if you've ever played a roguelike game, you have seen some of its mechanics in action. And if you have, that likely means that you know that it's also not all great, because procedural generation comes with its own set of hilarious glitches, mind-bending possibilities, and more random surprises than a piñata party. So join us as we tackle burning questions like how to keep gameplay fresh, the delicate balance between developer creativity and algorithmic chaos, and whether NPCs secretly practice interpretive dance in their spare time. Say your prayers to RNGesus. It's time to talk about procedural generation. I'm going to trip over that about 500 times during this episode. Just
get ready. Like judicial system, man. You can't.
Judicial system. Rural juror. In your opinion, what is the greatest advantage of procedural generation in video games? How does it enhance the overall gaming experience? And most importantly, what games have best utilized this?
I think the obvious answer is having a game that is always changing and is different every time you play it.
Yep.
And obviously that changes your experience every single time, and that's the main advantage of it. And when I think of that, I think of puzzle games, and the first one that comes to my mind there is Tetris. It's like that's always different every single time you think of it. You don't always think of that as a procedural generated game, but it is.
Yeah.
God.
Yeah, that's very true. I didn't think of Tetris at all, but you are 100%. I don't think I can't think of a single puzzle game where like you are given pieces that isn't procedurally generated, you know? It could be bust a move, like all of them procedurally generated. That's crazy.
Yeah, my brain just exploded from hearing that.
The only one I can think of that's not as far as a puzzle game that isn't procedurally generated would be something like Picross, where it's like, oh, you're trying to figure out the same picture every single time.
Right.
I also
or those Sokoban puzzles where you're like sliding the boxes into the same places, like those sorts of things.
I also want to shout out Dragon Quest Builders, because that's just a favorite of mine that may or may not fall into that category, but it's cool.
It is cool. Yeah, I agree with you. I think the best usage for this is allowing for infinite replayability. There are a bunch of different places where this is true. If you think about Borderlands, like, yes, the storyline, the maps, all of those are identical, but all of the weapons inside Borderlands are procedurally generated, and that makes it really, really awesome. It makes you really want to find more loot, you know? The same thing is true inside Diablo. But Diablo takes it a step further and also procedurally generates all of their maps, which means that every time that you go in, you've got a different, capability of seeing. Maybe you'll see this cool thing in the map. Maybe there's this other cool thing. Maybe you'll see a thing you've never seen before. So I think Diablo is probably the poster child for procedural generation. But if you want to talk about procedurally generated maps, I think Warframe knocks this out of the park. They've got a couple areas that are like open world, and those maps are the same. But for the most part, anytime you are stepping foot inside a cave or a ship or even underwater in some levels, it's procedurally generated, and it's almost always going to be a really unique, really engaging design, because they've taken the time to hone that algorithm over the years. It used to not be that way, and now it is very, very good. So if you're looking for like great map design that's procedurally done, check out Warframe.
That's so cool. I didn't even realize that was a thing in Warframe. I'm gonna have I'm just gonna have to take a look at that. But I would love to talk about like unique experiences and storylines that happens when like you procedurally generate a whole bunch of different like events that can happen in the game. And a prime example of this, and I'm going to talk a lot about this game in particular, is RimWorld. Like a lot of the characters that you see in there are procedurally generated. The stats that they have are procedurally generated. The maps are also generated by like a specific seed. But then the events that happen in the game can be completely random. Like you could find like you could have an invasion like come into your particular colony, or like somebody starts to, I don't know, decide that one day they want to fall in love with another character. That game is just crazy, and there's like so many things to do, and sometimes like the event can ruin your game, and it's so much fun.
Yeah, that's a great call out. It honestly, talking about those events reminds me of like SimCity, not a game you would consider procedurally generated, except for the map at the beginning, and then when Godzilla randomly fucking shows up.
Yeah.
Or Bowser if you're playing the SNES version.
Yeah. Oh man, that's awesome. All right, so some people will argue that procedural generation can lead to repetitive and uninspired gameplay. What are your thoughts on this criticism? How can game developers address it effectively?
I mean, I get like why people say like it can be uninspired, because you're essentially allowing a computer to generate the experience rather than being creative and coming up with like original content to like, you know, have your players go through. But like I think that having like a good mix of like original content that like or like a vision of like how the game needs to be designed needs to be like intertwined with some of the procedurally generated stuff, so that we can like develop more content for the player. More specifically, I think like weapons or items like can be procedurally generated, because like I'm sure like a lot of people like are looking for weapons, and they want to have like that type of grind.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at like a Destiny, for instance, all of those weapons are procedurally generated, and everybody just does the same content over and over again, hoping for the best possible role. Yeah, I think that that's a good call. And it's interesting that you called out like how many different options there are, because if there are too many, it's like, okay, I'm never going to get this goddamn gun that I want. But if there's too few, it's like, great, I've ran it 5 times and I was, statistically guaranteed to get the thing I wanted. And now I never have a reason to go back and do it again. So it really is a tightrope walk there. I have definitely seen games, not speaking about weapons, but speaking about like tile sets, where the algorithm is just not good enough. Or flip side, they haven't made enough assets to make the game engaging. But most of the time when I've noticed that, it's only noticeable because of other glaring issues in the game, right? If the gameplay itself is good, I usually won't worry about like, oh, that's the same tree that I saw 5 screens ago or whatever, right? Because I'm so engaged in like what the game is giving to me. So it's oftentimes, if the tile set is like the same, but the game is really good, that doesn't really bother me. If I'm like playing a game and it's like the same enemy over and over and over again, that might be bad procedural generation, or it might just be like that's the theme of this level, and so it's a hard line to walk to figure out, like, is this what was intended, or is this a bad algorithm? But if you nail the other stuff in the game, if like the sound design's good, the audio is good, the gameplay is good, the graphics are otherwise good, most of the time this stuff kind of melds into the background.
Yeah,
at least for me.
I don't think that the criticism of that is completely unfounded. I have such a hard time getting into roguelikes or procedurally generated games. I think it takes a huge shift in perspective to finally get into them. I'm so used to stuff like Mega Man, where it's like it's the same time every time I play. There's a goal. I'm trying to get to this point. The challenge for me is getting from point A to point B. And then I go to something like Dead Cells, where it's like, this is a Metroidvania. I do love this, but then I'm also frustrated every time I die because I'm like, I just want to get to the end of this damn game. But is there an end? I don't know. I've still never. I think my longest run has been like 35 minutes or something like that.
I feel
and
you on that.
That's the frustrating thing for me, is I'm so used to being able to complete a game that when I can't, I'm like, I don't even know if I want to be into this, and it's so hard for me to do that. So relying on procedural generation is a tough thing. But I think once you kind of can shift that thought process of like, oh, this is the kind of experience I'm going for this time. It doesn't have to be about completing. It's about how far I can get. I think that makes it completely different. Once I realized that randomizers were kind of like roguelikes, that opened my whole world up. It's like, oh, I really enjoy randomizers. This is procedurally generated every time I start the game, but there's still that ending experience. So I think that's kind of the perfect middle ground for me.
Yeah. It's funny that you called out Mega Man specifically, because like Mega Man, you learn the map. You know where the enemies are going to spawn. You know all of that stuff. Whereas in a game like Dead Cells, you can never learn the map, but you can learn you can learn the language of each level of each biome, so that you can start to become prepared for, like, these are the enemies I'm going to see, and this is the possible behavior, and these are the like traps, and they'll like, here's how I get through it, right? So you learn kind of the gameplay loop is kind of the same, but it's never going to be identical because Dead Cells is procedurally generated. And it's funny because you're like, for you that's frustrating, and for me that's exciting. That leads into this next question perfectly, though. How important for you is the balance between handcrafted content and procedurally generated elements in a video game? Like, what factors should developers consider when they're trying to find that balance, in your opinion?
I think it depends on the kind of game you're going for. If it's like an endlessly explorable kind of game, you probably don't need as much handcrafted content. Back when Minecraft was finally released for the Xbox 360, I was able to fall down that hole because I didn't have a gaming PC beforehand. And I loved just being able to just like wander the map, like, oh, here's a cave. I'm going to see how far down I can get. Like that was really cool. Yeah. And like in something like that, you don't need you just need the map to be generated, and then you go and explore it. But if you're looking for something that's more storyline or something else, then you probably need a lot more of that. So again, I think it just depends on the type of game that you're going for.
Sure, I agree. And I also think that like for, specific things where like you need to farm for materials or something like that, like I feel like having something that's procedurally generated will allow me to actually be more engaged with the with finding these items or like gathering the material. And honestly, like I feel like sometimes like if there's like too much content, like procedurally generated content, like it kind of gets like lost in the sauce. You know what I mean? Like, because there's like too much for you to go through, and like the game developer needs to be able to direct that content to make the player experience just way more enjoyable and cohesive.
Yeah. This question is actually what prompted my writing of this episode, because in the Summer Games preview episode, Mel and Brody were having a conversation around how Starfield is only going to have like 1,000 worlds to explore, whereas No Man's Sky obviously has an infinite number because they are procedurally generated. And that made me think back to Mass Effect 1, where you can land on any planet. You can go down on any planet, but it's obvious that they were procedurally generated, and also a vast majority of them were empty, and that sucked, right? Because I sat through this like 5-minute loading screen to land on a planet that had nothing on it. I have to like circumnavigate the entire planet to make sure that that's true. And now I'm like, all right, I just wasted 20 minutes on this fucking dumbass planet. Like that sucks. And so I think that the right mix here is where companies use procedural generation as a jumping off point, but then they could hand curate what's been created to make sure that it's coherent, that it's interesting, because you can definitely tell when it hasn't been, when something doesn't have that human soul in it, right? Like procedural generation isn't good enough right now to where you can fool someone with it, but it can be good enough to where you don't have to if the rest of the stuff around it is fun, right? And so like I guarantee Starfield, 1,000 planets, no one sat down and decided like, oh, the circumference of this planet is going to be X, right? No one did that. They had that was procedurally generated in some way. But then they took all of those things and were like, all right, does it make sense for the planet to be this big? It does. Great. Move on. Right. And that's what allows it to be like handcrafted and feels good, as opposed to just feeling like, well, this is something a computer shit out on ticker tape. Like, it's a very, very different experience, at least in my opinion. Do you think
that somebody like at Bethesda was like, I'm going to sit here in front of this computer and look at all of these worlds that this, computer has generated for me, and then just like hand pick the ones that they thought would be like interesting enough for the player to be on?
I think Bethesda would be foolish if that wasn't someone's job.
Crazy. I can't imagine that being somebody's job.
If that, like, imagine the number of like samey planets there will be if that wasn't, though.
True. That's very true.
Yeah, I think your callback to Mass Effect is exactly right in that instance. If Starfield turns out to be another Mass Effect 1 where you just drive the friggin' Mako around and it's like, oh, I'm glad I found these resources. You know? that would be a huge error on their part.
Constantly.
That's why I remember being so excited in Mass Effect 2 when they fixed that. I was like, oh, the only planets you can travel to have a reason for it. Otherwise, you can just play this tiny mini game and then you get your resources that you would have found after driving around in the fucking Mako for 3 hours.
Yeah. Gosh, I felt like thinking about it now, like every single time I would land on a planet with the Mako, it felt like I was on the moon and going through craters because everything was just gray.
Yep.
Yeah, and it was fucking terrible. It's like the worst part of that game.
True.
So
it was exciting when you occasionally found something, though, but that was so few and far.
True.
And I don't think that makes up for the hours you spent searching those goddamn planets.
There was one scenario where I like landed and there was like this base and I like had to hack my way in and like killed a bunch of slavers and shit. And then later on, someone was like, hey, I need you to go to this planet and kill these slavers. And I got this dialogue choice that was like, I already did that. And they're like, you did? Oh, that's so cool. And I was like, yes, it's all been worth it. It was not worth it. It was not. But in the moment, it was, right? Yeah, if that wasn't someone's job on Starfield, then either they fucked up or they have the most faith in their algorithm ever.
Yeah.
Right? Like those are the two choices there.
Maybe it'll be all of our jobs to test them out. And then Starfield 2 will be
No
better.
Man's Sky style. Yeah. Great point. All right. So speaking of vast and immersive game worlds, procedural generation allows for those, but it also can result in absolutely insane, unpredictable outcomes. Have you seen this unpredictability? Did it help or hurt the gameplay?
Being a fairly new enjoyer of roguelikes, I haven't run into any issues with this, but I can imagine the devastation of being like on a great run and then like, oh, I'm at a dead end and I'm dead. Like that would be so disappointing, but I also feel like part of me would laugh at that afterwards, like 5 years afterwards, once I've mourned the loss of everybody that I've killed out of frustration.
Oh my gosh.
Hi, it's me 5 years afterwards, Dale. I have seen this so much. I have been trapped in rooms where I had to kill all of the enemies, but one of the goddamn dudes spawned behind a wall or legitimately inside a rock. Or like I had one scenario where I was fighting this thing that had like tentacles or tendrils or whatever, and it spawned underneath the ground so it could hit me with its tendril things that clipped through the floor, but I couldn't hit it. and I'm just like sitting there trying to like, okay, can I use explosives? No. Can I use fire to shoot inside this rock? Like, does the fire clip through the rock? Because I know the bullets don't. My sword doesn't because I clang off it. But maybe I can. Nope. All right. Whatever. Cool. I have to restart. Now in this restart, the floor just wasn't completed. And so I fell for what seemed like forever. But I hit the bottom of the zone and that'll kill me. Nope. It warps me to the top of the zone. And now the level is just like a tiny dot below me. And I guess the whole game is taking place between two portals. I don't know. But the flip side of that is I have had situations where I have completely broken the game with insane overpower builds that were so much fun to play with. And so it's a double-edged sword, right? There's a balance there. Sometimes the game fucks you and sometimes you fuck the game. And
Binding of Isaac is a perfect example of that. Like when you pick up an item and like the next thing you know, like it breaks everything that you already have. And you're like, I don't know what just happened. I was doing so good and I was why? Like, why am I just dead now?
Or why am I an unstoppable killing machine that fills the screen with lasers? Like,
yeah. Gosh, I also want to talk about RimWorld because like the storyline, because it generates itself. I have seen like relationships happen among colony members, but then like one person decides that they like wants to marry this other person, but there's like a love triangle happening with like another colonist, so that like they are all like wanting to sleep in the same bed, but they can't because the bed's only made for like two people. And then the other character that's like part of this love triangle, not married to like the colonist or whatever, is now murdering people because it's so mad that they're not in the bed with their significant other and just ruins my whole entire colony. Crazy stuff will happen like that. And there's also in like scenarios where I've been in where like I've spent maybe like a good 10 hours building my colony, right? Like I have like a really nice base. I've collected a lot of like different materials. And next thing I know, like there's an invasion happening where like insect creatures will come out of the ground in my base and then just murder everything, or like decides that it wants to destroy like my explosive units that I have and then just blow up a wall like in my colony. Good times. Really good times.
That sounds amazing. It sounds a lot like The Sims on fucking crack cocaine.
It is. Yeah. But it like it makes the game like so interesting because like you never know what's going to happen next. Like you could be having like a very great run just to be ruined by like a relationship, or like be ruined because like your one character is so unhappy that its dog died, so now it wants to like stab everybody. Like craziness, just crazy.
That sounds awesome. That sounds absolutely awesome. All right, so zooming out a little bit, procedural generation's been used in a bunch of different game genres, from roguelikes to open world exploration titles. Are there specific genres or experiences where you believe procedural generation is particularly effective, and if so, why?
Well, I'll go back to
go ahead. I was just gonna say, I think anytime that you want a game to be replayable, you should consider procedural generation, right? I think it works best in games that aren't too concerned with story, since that is often generated weird, right? Like if you look at like the two most recent God of War games, if any bit of that was procedurally generated, it would have felt like bad. It would have just felt bad. You could tell that it was all handcrafted, and that allowed them to pace the story really well and like feed out bits of it and script where the dialogue happens and all of that. You cannot do that with a procedurally generated game. You also can't do that where you want to build a particularly coherent world, right? So if you look at like Souls likes, I don't think you can ever have a procedurally generated Souls like. It just can't happen because you want the world to tell the story. And if you give that power away to something else, it's not going to work. But I think that there are a bunch of games where this works really well. We've already talked about roguelike. Xando blew my fucking brain open with puzzle games. But I want to highlight survival games, right? Survival games are examples where this works really well because you get a new experience every time. You are not going to beat it. There's not a beating it. It's just how long can you live, right? But on the flip side of that, I think survival horror would be an absolute nightmare. Can you imagine a Resident Evil where the mansion is randomized? I can, and I
that's a
hate
huge
it.
nope for me.
I think they do actually randomize Resident Evil games.
Do they really? No.
I think it's more item locations than it is like the actual rooms.
Oh, okay.
But
yeah.
Right. Because you can do it that way, because then it's like the red opal is like not locked behind a door that needs the red opal to open it, you know? But like different hallways that just like branch in on it, like, yeah, it sounds.
But you wouldn't
miserable.
be able to do it in like regular horror games, I feel like, because you want to be able to control the intensity and like the tension of like when the person's supposed to get scared, right? So interesting. I still hate the freaking mansion though. That sounds horrible.
I weirdly think it might be kind of neat, like the Betrayal at the House on Haunted Hill kind of game where like the rooms are different every time and you know that you're gonna die, you know?
Yeah, it would be different if that were the whole thing. Is like, all right, how far in can you get? Like, can you survive the madness? No, you cannot, but you can see a lot of it. And it'll be cool.
Yeah, but the
that's
idea
a very
of
different
the locked
game,
doors and the random puzzles, that's not great. I would call back to my earlier shout out of Dragon Quest Builders, which is, if you guys aren't familiar, basically a Minecraft clone with a simple story and RPG elements woven in. Like you start, you are the, it's, let me back up. It is the continuation of the first Dragon Quest game where the Demon Lord succeeded. Like the hero wasn't there to stop him, and so he destroyed the world. And you are the only person who is able to create. And you go back and you find this settlement, and they're like, "We don't know how to build shit, but we need rooms. Can you make one?" And like, here's this blueprint we found. Can you build a room? And it's like, okay, a room has a bed, a dresser, and a door, and 4 walls. Build that. And they're like, sweet. Then here comes another guy and like, I need a room too. And you just got to kind of get these quests to build the different rooms. The maps are all procedurally generated. And so then you have to go and find resources and all that. It did get a little bit repetitive, like, because every time you complete a settlement, you have like a big monster fight and you're like, great, you brought the light back to this world and we've learned how to create now. Thanks so much. And you get whisked away to another section of the world where the first one was like grass and green everywhere. Now this one's more like, this is a cemetery. Things are going to be spooky here, but you have to basically do the same shit. Build me a room. It needs a bed. It needs 4 walls and a door.
Right.
But it was neat. Like it had a very simple story where it didn't matter like that it was a simple story, because that was kind of the point of it. You kind of get to move on. So I thought that was a very good way of that being used.
Yeah. I honestly particularly think that like any type of looter games that help, like that you as a character, you want to become more powerful, procedurally generated items is perfect for that, right? Like, because it's repetitive enough because you're looking for certain items, but like it's also engaging because like you're trying to find the god roll of a specific item. This is literally not what I wrote in the outline, but like honestly, I think that's like one of the best and most effective use of procedurally generated content. That, and also like procedurally generated maps for, I guess, like I was like thinking Terraria like in my head because you were talking about Minecraft, and I love the fact that like you can find, just dig down into like this giant abyss and just find random like creatures or like buildings and stuff, and I always find that to be very fun. I feel like that's more like the survival games that Dale already talked about.
Yeah, it is, but I think it just highlights the fact that like if you think back, Minecraft started as a survival game, right? Right now it's like I don't know what the fuck it is. It's like a like simulated Legos. People are building computers and shit inside Minecraft at this point. It's transcended a survival game. But at the same point, like it started as a survival game. Terraria started as a survival game. And I think it does a really good job there. You also, like, you called out roguelikes. Like, think about how much less fun Risk of Rain 2 would be if every level were the same. If you knew where you were headed next.
It's very true. Yeah.
Like, that would suck. So, I don't know. Any game where they want you to do multiple runs is my answer for this. Yeah. So one concern with procedural generation is the potential for algorithmic biases or unfair outcomes. How can game developers ensure procedural fairness and inclusivity in their games? And I think the biggest thing here is that if you are going to rely on an algorithm, it has to be absolutely flawless. I remember some game that I was playing a while back where all of the levels were procedurally generated, but they had too many circle rooms. Like they were overlapping circles on top of themselves to make weird corners in the middle of walls and stuff. And that took me out of the game, right? Getting too many of the same weapon in a row can take you out of the game. I'm playing a procedurally generated game for variety, and so I will certainly notice when it's not there. And that also goes for games that have procedurally generated NPCs. I distinctly remember Vice City. The main cast of characters, very diverse, right? All different shapes, sizes, colors, all of that, right? A whole lot of the fucking citizens in Vice City were very, very white.
Yeah.
And that is a failure of the algorithm. You have fucked up. If your city does not look as diverse as it should, your algorithm is bad. You have put some sort of implicit bias inside that algorithm. And that's a really easy thing to overlook that can take you out of it.
I feel like because Vice City is such an older game, there could have been a limitation on like the amount of data that you could put into the algorithm that caused like the NPCs to be very similar to one another. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yes, but that means that you need to allocate your resources differently. Like you can have 2 less hairstyles if it means that I get 2 more skin colors.
I remember, now that you mentioned that, I remember seeing like it, remembering if I wanted to get a certain type of car, I better be driving it, because then that car would be everywhere. So that when I damaged it and it was almost on fire, I was like, okay, let me hop out and I can get another one right here. So it was always exciting. Like, holy shit, I've never seen that car before. Like,
and then you would get in that car and you'd see it everywhere.
Just like when you buy a car in real life. Like, I've never seen anybody drive a Ford Taurus in 2011 before. Oh shit, never mind. They're fucking everywhere.
I'm going to talk about RimWorld again because like I think they did a super great job in terms of like trying to figure out, like try to overcome the biases or like unfair outcomes, because they allow you to pick 3 different types of like options when you play a game. One is like the more casual playthrough where there's not a lot of randomness happening at one point. It's like literally paced where like, you know, crazy things will happen, but it's not going to be as often, right? A storyline playthrough would be like, okay, as your colony gets bigger, the likely and more rich, the likelihood of intense random things will increase, or things that could be super devastating. And then like the third option is like just pure and utter chaos. Like anything can happen at any point. Like your colony can die right off the bat. And I love this concept because I feel like they're categorizing the different events that can happen between like what's beneficial versus like what is harmful for your colony, and then set a specific ratio, and then like limiting the like occurrence of like that one item, like one event happening over and over again. And I felt like that was such a like a great way to like make the game seem fair to how you as a player want to play the game.
Yeah, I agree. 100% agree.
But more game developers need to actually start thinking about that, like as they're like utilizing like this concept, right? Like I feel like a lot of times that they just kind of overlook that.
Yeah.
Just go, oh, random, cool.
Letting someone, like when you think about difficulty for most games is just like yes, it will always be there. And the idea of letting players also choose how much randomness they have is a really cool idea.
The first time that I realized I might enjoy roguelikes, and I mentioned this before, was playing randomizers of established games. But they always had logic in place. So like in Link to the Past, for example, there are certain areas that you can't get through if you don't have a lantern. And so they make it so that lantern is never found in those areas where you need a lantern to get to them. So I think having something like that in a procedurally generated game is key to making sure that you have that that balance to rule out the unfairness or the unfair outcomes. I think another thing that might be interesting to try would be implementing like a luck system that can lead players from running into those those undesired outcomes. So like if you have really good luck, you're probably not going to do this. But if you have bad luck, yeah, you might. Sorry about that. Obviously, you'd have to keep that something that can't be tracked to keep it interesting. Like, you know, who knows if it's like a reward for like completing a certain task a certain way, and then like that bumps up your luck a little bit. So now you know you're going to have a better run. But again, that's kind of a tricky thing because you don't want people to be able to track that so that they're not constantly getting the optimized run.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. That makes me think of Fallout. Because obviously one of your skills is luck, and there's this perk called the Mysterious Stranger, where every once in a while, when you are in a random encounter and you pull up your VATS thing, if you have the Mysterious Stranger perk, this dude will just appear and shoot the thing that you're shooting and then disappear.
Oh.
And how frequently he shows up, at least in Fallout 3 and in New Vegas, was based on your luck stat. And so it's a cool thing where it's like, all right, do you want this little bit of bonus? Like that sort of thing. I think like games like Fallout would be perfect places for them to like mess around with the luck stat, because it's like, all right, yeah, luck is loot, parentheses, and other stuff.
Yeah. Enemies showing up in random places that you wouldn't expect.
Yeah, that's cool.
And you could just have Charlie Brown runs where no matter what you do, your luck is just shit and you get rocks and everything.
I have definitely had Binding of Isaac runs where that's the case, man.
For sure.
Where it's just like bad item after bad item. That's the worst part, is when you're playing a procedurally generated game that has like good items and bad items, not like good items and great items. Because Isaac has a lot of items that are just like bad. They will kill your run. And every once in a while, the game is just like, no, today you don't have fun. Oh, man. All right. So let's look ahead. How do you envision the future of procedural generation in video games? Are there any advancements or innovations that you hope to see in this field that could revolutionize game development?
I think an AI generated storyline might be neat for like role playing end games. So like you've completed the main story, but then how do you continue these relationships with like towns that you're visiting and stuff like that? And then that leads me into thinking about how that would be really good for breaking up the monotony in games like Stardew Valley or Harvest Moon. Imagine you finished your 3-year run, you've got your farm however you need, but then something like an Animal Crossing mechanic comes in where like, oh, that army veteran has left town and now here comes this new family, and how do you interact with them while still running your farm and all of that, like different like, oh, you married so and so character and now this other so and so character who wanted to be with that person is now like leaving town, and then how does that void get filled? So I think that would be something neat to see, just mixing like those two genres of like Harvest Moon, Animal Crossing, and the relationships that you would have.
Oh, for sure. That'd be so cool. Like I'm thinking about it like in my head right now, and I'd be like, I would play that game 110%. Like,
and that was kind of one of the things that really bummed me out about the most recent Animal Crossing. Granted, I still spent like a ridiculous amount of hours into it, was that there were 5 types of villagers, and once you had one of each, you were running into the same dialogue. Like if you had a whole bunch of sporty characters, they all said the same shit, but they were just slightly different because their houses were decorated differently. I'd love to see more variety so you don't run into that whole Vice City kind of situation.
Yeah, exactly. Like I can't remember now what the villager limit is inside Animal Crossing, but let's say it's like 20, right? If you can have 20 villagers on your island, the number of villager categories should be like 30.
Yeah, I think in
I think it's 10.
New Horizons, I think the max was 8 villagers, and there were 6 different types.
Yeah, give me 15 different types, right? If you can have 8 guys, give me 15 different types. So that way, like the characters that I pick, it's a real choice.
Yeah, for me, eventually it was like, I really like the grumpy characters, but not all my characters can be grumpy, because then it did like eventually start to dictate what types of DIY recipes you would get. And so I had to make sure I was constantly like, okay, I've got these 6, but I like grumpy, so I can have 3 grumpy characters. This is going to be great.
I think as language learning models improve, we can start to see games where some of the characters can do things like make their own choices, have motivations that change and whatnot, right? like we already have, like if you think about Telltale games, you already have things like Clementine will remember that, right? But then later down in the game, that leads to a binary decision, right? It's like, did you do this back then? If yes, this happens. The ability to have that change and grow as you continue down the game with it not being dictated necessarily by a story beat, but instead by like, okay, well, now my character has seen you do all of this fucked up shit and they don't trust you anymore. Or now you have proven that you are a trustworthy person. And so they're more likely to go along with you. Right. And I think about that along with like conversation trees in like a Mass Effect. And those two things together is like a really, really exciting potential future for gaming. Like having characters whose motivations change based on what you say to them, and that changes how they behave inside the game, just sounds really, really awesome to me.
Yeah. And like your actions also change like what they would do. I would love to see that in like D&D type video games, because I feel like that would be incredible to just like sit back and just like watch the characters just develop themselves, right? Like you wouldn't have to do anything. You just watch the storyline of like this one random character fall in love with somebody else, or like decide that it wants to like steal from this person because it's a bad guy or something, right? Like
yeah, just completely stop going on quests just to kind of be a voyeur and watch all these people.
Exactly. Yeah, because it would just be so interesting,
just
right?
Turns
like
into a soap opera.
I mean, but it sounds cool, right?
Yeah. Totally. Yeah.
Like there was a little bit of this in Mass Effect where if you were a dick, like Zaid in Mass Effect 2 would also be a dick, and if you were good, he would be good. But it's just like I don't know, man. There's a game, Dragon's Dogma. Have you guys played any
Heard
of this?
It, but I've not played it.
You like build an NPC that is like your character, and then you build these other NPCs that are your helpers, but they can be brought into other games, and they learn from how you're like, they learn how to play based on how you play, right?
Oh,
which is awesome.
Yeah.
Except Dragon's Dogma is pretty straightforward, and so they all just become like loot goblins, right? Because it's like, what do you do once you clear a room? You break all of the shit and you pick up all the loot. And so your character eventually just starts breaking all of the shit and picking up all of the loot.
That's funny.
And so like that, but like good is what I want.
Yeah.
Games learning you reminds me of Undertale. Have you guys both played Undertale?
Yeah.
Yes.
I've bought Undertale 3 different times because I usually go for the pacifist ending, and it shames me out of playing the game again. Have you guys done the pacifist ending?
I have not.
Yeah, that's the only one I've done.
Yeah, so if you do the pacifist ending, you get the happy ending for all the characters. If you go to start the game again, Flowey, the main character that you run into at the beginning, is like, you're gonna start a new game. You're gonna erase the happy endings for all of your friends.
Oh my god!
Just so you can play the game again. And I'm like, no, Flowey, I'm not. I'm gonna go buy this on Switch now. Thanks a lot. Like, I literally have never played my Switch version of the game again because I don't want to break the hearts of all my friends that I helped.
Oh my god!
So
that's
I
amazing.
own it on Mac. I own it on PC.
I love that.
It's completely not procedurally generated, but the way the game, like Flowey knows what you've done, or like even if you do like genocide runs and you start another game, it's like Sans talks to you like, "Hey, I know what you did, by the way."
Oh,
anyway, what's going on over here?
Oh my god. Can you just imagine like games just breaking the fourth wall by using like AI generated conversations with you? Like I would lose
Holy
it.
shit, man. You just blew my mind about like the ending of Doki Doki Literature Club,
Monica,
where it's fucking AI. Oh no, I couldn't handle that. That's too fucking much.
Right?
Mention a game that's like completely linear and normal, like a Final Fantasy, but there's a narrator, but then like talks to you about the shit that you've done as AI.
That would be so fun because you can still like essentially play the story, right? But like the narrator's just giving you shit the whole time.
Man, you didn't help that family in city number 2? That sucks. And you just go on. It's like, oh wow, you made a choice to save people. Remember those guys in city number 2? You failed? That's unfortunate. Anyway, go on. What's what you're doing?
Oh my gosh.
I'm glad you feel good about yourself.
I'm glad you saved this family. That kid's having trouble in school now. Oh,
just
man.
a game that taunts you all the way through.
I love it. I kind of want it.
Oh, man. All right. So I answered this question. We kind of just talked. Do you guys have anything else to say about this?
I mean, my answer was like having AI generated conversations and where you can like give a character a personality, set its voice, and then like have the AI do its job. But we kind of already talked about it. So I'm good for moving on.
It looks like your answer was Dragon's Dogma.
Yeah, kind of. Also, randomly generated hairstyles for characters at the beginning. Always fun. They do that with Eden in Binding of Isaac. Every time you restart with Eden, she's got a different hairstyle, and that's great. All right. It's time for our last question. And you know what that means? It's time for a sponsored question. This question, and in fact, this whole episode, surprise, surprise, Zando and Mel, is sponsored by ChatGPT.
Oh my God. I should have known.
Right. Soon to be the writer on all video games moving forward, and then not much longer after that, all of our bosses, but also the writer of almost every one of these questions today was ChatGPT. I just went in and cleaned them up a little bit for the episode and made them sound like, like they fit our format.
Yeah, and we both complimented you before this episode too.
You sure as hell did. I wasn't going to say that. The whole episode generated by ChatGPT. The intro, I cleaned it all up because it was pretty fucky. But yeah, all of these questions, ChatGPT.
Thanks.
Anyway, you have been given the power to make anything in your life procedurally generated. Where do you use this power first? Where do you never use this power?
This was a very difficult question.
It was very hard, but I'll go first. I would love to use this power for plants, where as the plant grows, it sprouts out a different type of leaf, right? Like from a different plant. There's no genetics in plants anymore. It's all just fucking random. Enjoy. Could be.
When you chose this, did you forget about poisonous plants?
Oh no! I remembered it. I'm in, right? You just have to know which ones are good and which ones are bad.
I love it. I love this because most medicine is based on plants, and so it's fuck it.
But at the same time, medicine derived from something that's completely random. It'd be cool to synthesize that particular component and then build more medicine because it's all random. We could probably cure cancer from it, right? Because it's random.
I guess that's true. All right, I'll go next. But first, I need to point out the fact that when I asked ChatGPT to create a silly question based on procedurally generated video games, it gave me shit like, there's a marshmallow lake with bunnies in knight armor. What do you do? And so I had to write this question myself. Yeah, it was real fucky, man. I can show you guys later, but it could not figure out how to write a silly question. I love that. Anyway, so this one's original. All of the other ones are ChatGPT, though. Anyway, my answer to this question is that I want procedurally generated restaurant menus. Every time that you look at the menu, it is different. The chaos would be absolutely amazing. Chefs with incredibly high skill levels would be the most sought after people on the planet. You can make a perfect scrambled egg, pad thai, and fresh pasta. You're hired. That's perfect for me, right? Plus, it's you never have to decide what restaurant you're going to. You go to any restaurant and then figure it out when you get there.
I like it.
It's great. I do want to put an honorable mention to procedurally generated fridge contents, but I didn't pick it because I know with my luck it would be empty, close it, open it, empty, close it, open it, human limbs, close it, open it, hornets, god damn it, close it, open it, empty. And I don't need that in my life.
I know we kind of touched on it in an earlier question and said that it would be a bad thing, but I think having a procedurally generated house might be kind of cool. Like every time you go into a different room, like, oh, this is completely different than what I was expecting. I was kind of hoping for an office so I could get some work done, but I guess we're doing art today. And then I also thought of the fridge, but I didn't think of the option of human limbs or hornets. So I guess that's not a great idea.
I mean, if you get to pick the algorithm, it's probably good.
Yeah.
Right. That algorithmic bias where I get pizza every day sounds awesome. Plus, not having to pay for groceries sounds really good too. That's the benefit.
That
there
does sound good.
One place I definitely don't want procedurally generated. Yes, is my commute or to like visiting family members or something like that. Like I'm already really bad at following my GPS because I'm the way I've kind of been hardwired as a kid is to like look for landmarks. Oh, this is where I need to turn at this gas station or whatever. So when I have to go somewhere new, I have to keep my eyes on the GPS, or otherwise I'm definitely going to fuck it up. And even then I will fuck it up anyway. So the idea of driving home to visit my parents, or my parent, I guess I should say, and then having to just figure it out every single time sounds awful.
Yeah, that does sound terrible.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I didn't talk about my terrible power thing for
where don't you want?
I don't want it to change my sounds. Like when you break a glass, it sounds like a fucking car horn. Or like every step that you take, it sounds different every single time. Like one step, a person screaming. The next step is just like dogs barking or something like that. It'd be horrible.
I mean, here's the thing. If you're just taking a random sample of sounds, most sounds that are happening in the universe are very, very quiet, right? It's the sound of like a dust mite's footstep, right? But that also means that a dust mite's footstep might be a train horn while you're trying to sleep. And that sounds fucking horrible. It'd be like silence, 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 silence. And then every once in a while, the sample error of like noise.
Yeah. You're just connecting to the internet in 1997.
That modem sound. Oh my God.
I'm just going to turn on my white noise machine so I can fall. Fuck. Nope. Never mind.
Oh,
AOL.
Jet engine. AOL.
It would be my luck where like I have a like alarm set, but it'd be like a cat purring to wake you up.
Yeah.
I would never wake up from it.
Yeah. Oh my God.
And then imagine the bias where like all of a sudden your alarm every morning is Poison by Belle Biv DeVoe. And you just like
Poison.
You begin to hate that song. Every time you wake up, it's like bump up and up, up and up and up. Fuck, God damn it, not again.
Be right back. Setting my alarm to Poison by Belle Biv DeVoe. That song fucking slaps, and I don't think I'll get tired of it. That song's so good, man.
Well, then you're welcome.
That girl is. I'm gonna set it to just the line. Never trust a big butt and a smile. Those are words to live by. Thank you, Belle or Biv or DeVoe. Anyway, ridiculous. All right, you guys got anything else to say about procedural generation?
No.
I think I'm good.
I think I've procedurally generated as much as I can about this topic.
Nice. All right.
My bias has run out.
Your bias has run out. I've got one last bias we haven't talked about.
Go for it.
Fucking Dan.
Oh, that guy.
Yeah. I love Dan, but seriously, fuck that guy. Anyway, tell the people where you can be found.
You can find me in the Discord and pretty much anywhere else in the entire internet under Zando Calrissian.
I am Melephant. You can probably find me somewhere as Melephant.
I am everywhere. If you see in a 20-sided ninja, it's me, goddammit. I just secured my Blue Sky. I'm on Mastodon now. I'm on Lemmy now. I'm all over the Fediverse at this point.
Nice.
Fuck billionaires. Federated social media is where it's at. I've decided.
Man, Mastodon and Lemmy, is everything social media just gonna be named after heavy metal icons from now on?
You got a problem with it, dog?
I don't.
I like it.
I will stab you with a linoleum knife.
That's very specific.
Babies don't use social media. Leave the seed outside. Leave it in the streets.
Run it over
it after the show. Oh my God.
All right. We've lost our minds. If you don't know what we're talking about, search Mastodon Aqua Teen Hunger Force on YouTube. Yep. If you do know what we're talking about, you're welcome for reminding you. Everybody say goodbye.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Have a super okay day, guy.